Hi, and welcome to Spooky Owls. My name's David Saunderson, and really delighted today. We've got a very special guest. We've got Reverend Lionel Fanthorpe, who is known to many of you for his work over a very, very long time in the field of Fortean studies. I suppose Fortean studies is a word, I suppose. He has been on many TV shows, writes books, talks, does anything. If you've ever even remotely gone near anything kind of strange or spooky in your life, you've probably seen Lionel Fanthorpe being involved. I met him recently at a conference. I was fortunate to sit on the same stage as him. I felt very honoured, and now I'm getting to talk to him. And the reason we're talking today is that they've just released Fortean TV, an excellent television program from the 1990s that used to be on Channel 4 that ran for 22 episodes, and it was bizarre. We're gonna talk to Lionel about Fortean TV and how bizarre it was. We're also going to have a bit of a chat with him about some of his adventures that he's done. So today we're going to be talking to Reverend Lionel Fanthorpe. Hi Lionel, how are you today?
I'm feeling absolutely fine.
I've almost been dreaming about you lately. I've been working my way through the Fortean TV. I'm going to say Blu-ray or DVD set that I was sent recently, and it was a fantastic program. You must have been really proud of what you did there.
I must admit, we enjoyed making it. It had enormous fun making it. And we also had a lot of excitement while making it. So it combined the two things that human beings enjoy, fun and excitement.
You also had a bit of singing involved as well, for people who have not seen it.
Oh, yes, we did. I was just going to see if I can find one of the numbers reasonably to hand. And if not, I can do a little bit as far as my 87-year-old memory will allow.
Well, what are you going to sing us? Because every episode ended with after the bizarre, we're sort of putting the cart before the horse here, but at the end of this, you basically did a song based on one of the weird stories.
Yeah, and well, the one that I can remember best was the Phantom Coach, and the Phantom Coach was alleged to run from Yarmouth on the east coast over to King's Lynn, right across the county, and one of the episodes in this Phantom Coach, there were headless passengers and a headless coachman, and there was also, at the time when a lot of people were claiming they'd seen it, there was a particularly nasty character called George Mace, who ran a gang of poachers, and they assaulted gamekeepers and farmers and were pretty brutal. And George Mace finished up dead in the grounds of Breckles Hall, and that's all in the song. And it goes, the Phantom Coach, it rolls by night from Yarmouth to King's Lynn, and the headless coachman sits above the headless men within. Why do they ride across the years and through the endless dark? The dead men in their phantom coach that never leaves a mark. And then there's the verse about George Mace. George Mace he was, a poacher bold, who led the Watton gang. The constables and the magistrates all swore George Mace would hang. But the coach rolled down that cold white road, took George Mace away, and his body lay at Breckles Hall before the break of day. And then it goes on again. Having told the story of George Mace in the program, that was how we finished it.
No, it was fantastic. And what I also enjoyed about the program, and we'll actually get back to the stories in a sec, because we're really just, we're talking about your involvement in it because you did a lot. I remember I'm sitting here watching over the last few weeks. I've been watching and reacquainting myself with it, and there's been a number of. I'm thinking, what is he doing there? Here's one I've got on the screen here, and I don't know if you can actually see it, but you're being buried up to your neck in with a mummy. Well, tell us about that. Like, can you tell us about what? I know why you were doing it, but what was going through your head?
It was, it was just the story that we were doing about mummification, and a number of mummies. One was a little dwarf character with the whole coffin in which he was laid was scarcely 2 feet long. The full-sized skull, and then they'd buried a tiny skeleton, which was only about 18 inches, alongside this skull. And so the whole program, another bloke who involved in the program, had loved his cat very much. And when the poor old cat died of old age, its owner mummified it in the Egyptian technique. And it's probably lasted a lot longer than he has.
Well, they're all quite expensive. I remember watching that. It must have been quite expensive. I think it was like we're talking thousands and thousands of pounds that
Oh,
he was charging for that.
it would be. Yes, it would be if there are still some, I think, very advanced firms of funeral directors who are in contact with mummifying people who would do it in the old Egyptian manner, but who at the same time would use more modern chemicals, and the things they mummified would last a lot longer than poor old King Tutankhamun. And yeah, so they did that one. The piece that you just showed of me being buried by a mummy was part of the. We would always put these little humorous bits in, as well as putting in the serious unsolved mystery. One I remember best was one my director thought of, and he said, "Would you mind?" I said, "No, I don't mind. I'm here to do the show and do it." And he said, "Well, I wonder if we got it was a program about survival and so on, and people lasting a very long time." And he said, "Suppose that we put you in the coffin and showed you in the coffin and then closed it up, and then we cut there, and then we have you outside opening the coffin and seeing yourself inside." That would surprise the audience.
Yeah, there was quite a lot of that. You see yourself and flicking around all over the place and moving and all that. It was really quite visual, the way you linked all the thing. Here's another one, which I'll just see if I can get up here. There's you wearing a wig. I can't remember what that was about, but that was the hair. That was
Yes.
about the bloke or the woman that had this thing that was supposedly gave people hair back.
Yes, and there was another piece we included in, I think, that same program, but it was about the waxwork of Adolf Hitler in Madame Tussauds, and his hair grew because Madame Tussauds makers, designers, creators would put real human hair on the waxwork. And whether by some freak of nature they'd got some hair that had still got some growth potential in it, but Hitler's characteristic quiff down here was getting on. We actually photographed the one of the staff in Madame Tussauds cutting Hitler's hair before it grew into his eyes. We had some strange adventures.
This is another one. I've just got one more that I've found, and this is you with your head in with a guinea pig.
Oh yes,
I was watching it and I was thinking, he's actually got his head in that cage. I mean, it was strange stuff you're doing. More probably stranger than some of the things you were talking about.
Well, I think some of it, why I didn't mind in the least doing some of these rather weird things that could, if anybody had more common sense than I've got, would have thought were rather too dangerous to fiddle with. But I think that I didn't see any problem or objection to it because of my main hobby, which is martial arts. I was martial arts instructor for years, and not long ago, the guy who runs the World Judo Association gave me an immense surprise. I got a letter from them saying, "We have decided, in view of your long fighting career, to award you a World Judo Association Black Belt 5th Dan," which I never earned in the ring, but it was lovely to have it. I've got his letter framed and pinned on the wall.
Well, you've definitely got a lot of strings to your bow. You're a former church vicar, or I think you said I think you still are, but you don't have a parish anymore.
No, I'm not in the church in Wales anymore. I'm just independent.
Okay, so
I did have the parish of St. Germans. I was there for a long time.
Okay. How does that inform your interest in the paranormal?
Well, I think that the more we learn about the mysteries of the world and the paranormal, the more amazing. I mean, we talk about, we use the phrase Almighty God, and we talk about the mysteries of God, the power of God. God has an infinite presence and is beyond all description in terms of his power and authority. And when we think of things we haven't yet discovered, I mean, nobody knows yet for certain, even if they are the most learned and experienced members of parapsychology societies or who have been researching for even more years than I have, that there are very great mysteries, that ghosts do not exist only in the imagination of somebody who's of a nervous disposition, but there are some very real and practical. I'll give you one quick example. I was filming a series called Castles of Horror, and we were over in Wavelsburg, and my sound engineer and cameraman and his assistant were all up on the roof while I was doing another piece of work down below, getting the script ready. And when I went up onto the roof, they were both highly intelligent, very sensible, practical sound and film engineers. And they were not looking as they normally looked. What I say? As if they were distressed or worried. And my cameraman, who was a great personal friend as well, said, Lionel, can we do everything possible to film this in one? We want to get off here. And so I did my best and we got it in one. And I said, what? And they were then going through what they'd heard about the castle and that there were strange things there. And in medieval times, witches and black magicians had been there in the lower dungeons. And during the Second World War, there were Nazi soldiers stationed there. And what they did to some of their victims, of course, is indescribable. And the thought that these very sensible professional team members wanted to go, they were feeling something coming up through those stones. And I did my best to get the shot in one so that they could get down again. That's weird.
It is. How did you, look, from as a lad? We always ask this question. What was your first sort of movement into the Fortean paranormal world?
Well, it started really when I was a little bit of a lad at school. I didn't like school. I wanted to get out as soon as I could, and having been born in 1935, I couldn't get out until 1950, and I was always tried to avoid lessons I found either boring or difficult or too complicated for me to understand. And the two lessons that I liked most to dodge were maths when it involved trigonometry or algebra or one of the difficult branches. And the other thing I liked to try to avoid was Latin. And so if there was a Latin lesson for my class, and this school building was a very old-fashioned 17th or 18th century building, I would dodge into the library, which had those big shelf dividers going through the library from one side to the other, so that the master in charge of the library could not see anybody hidden behind one of those. So I would get behind one of those, crouch down on the floor to avoid the maths and the algebra, the Latin and the algebra. And while I was down there, I'd pull a book out of the shelf and start having a read. And I found H.G. Wells, Jules Verne, and other writers about the paranormal. Wells had done a lovely book of short stories called Tales of the Unexpected, which I think is a glorious title even now. And that's where my interest started, because I began wondering whether there were real mysteries in the outside world, not just fictional mysteries. And that got me investigating. And the investigations that I did eventually led me on to, the Fortean TV. And Charles Fort wrote some marvellous. One of them was called the Book of the Damned, because he meant all the theories that had been damned by the traditional hierarchy. And so that was where it all began. That from an H.G. Wells book in the school library to investigating, and we had another thing that took my attention as a boy, a young boy, before I left school and took it up seriously. And we had a dear little dog, very small, about the size of a Pekingese. He was just a little mongrel. And his name was Prince. And he had his food bowl and his drinking bowl just outside the back door, so he could go out into the garden and enjoy his food. An incredibly friendly little chap. And whenever I came past, he'd be up on his hind legs and wanting to be patted, which I was always very happy to do because he's a lovely little boy. And then, on more than one occasion, and not just me, but other members of the family, saw him greeting somebody we couldn't see. It was as if he had seen a spirit form, or some sort of psychic entity, and he was up on his hind legs as if there was a person there, and he was wagging his tail. Whatever that psychic entity was, must have been a kind and friendly person. I can imagine a highly sensitive dog would be very happy to be greeted by a friendly ghost. But that was the first. I used to look at that and say to my mum and my grandmother who lived with us, Mum, what do you think Prince is saying? And she and grandmother both said, well, we don't know, but he seems to be seeing and communicating with somebody that we can't.
Mm.
And that's one of the, the very earliest experiences I had.
What do you? You've obviously been an investigator for a very long time. What have you come up with the answer, or have you got anywhere closer to the answer than you were when you were a young boy looking at Prince there with his not imaginary friend, but friend?
Somebody who turned up, yes. Well, I would look through all the investigations I've made, and I have been just as mystified when I'd finished it. I mean, sometimes there were things that you could easily explain away and push away. You could get something like, we came through the Second World War. I was a little boy of 10 when it finished, but it made a big impression on me growing up. And we had, shutters and all kinds of things to protect the house against the German Blitz. And there were occasions when a piece of shutter would come loose or a piece of the blackout material would come loose and there'd be a tapping noise. And I would go to investigate this tapping noise to say, is that by any means something paranormal? Oh, no, it's a piece of the shuttering. And so looking back right to the very earliest of my investigations, where it was the tapping noise, I would say that there are occasions when you can see what has happened or find out what was happening, and with a perfectly rational explanation. But think of one of the famous mysteries like the Mary Celeste. Well, there seems very little doubt in my mind because one of the lifeboats was missing. And unfortunately, when the story of the Mary Celeste was first circulated, it was said by somebody who should have known better that the lifeboats were on board, but they weren't. One was missing. And we also have to remember that Captain Benjamin Spooner Briggs, who had his wife on board with him, they also had an infant child with them that they were looking after. And here's Briggs, who adores his wife and child, and they are caught in a very bad storm. And the first thing you try to do is to launch the lifeboat. So Briggs's men got the lifeboat launched, and tragically, one of the things that isn't often included in the mystery of the Mary Celeste, that there's a broken tow rope at the stern of the ship. And it would seem to me that they'd hitched the lifeboat about 30 yards behind the vessel, so they were safe from colliding with it. But that as the storm got worse, the rope snapped. The wind was coming in from the side and the lifeboat was held back by the wind, at the mainsails on the Mary Celeste, boom, and the rope went. Then, of course, you've got 8 men and a woman and child in a lifeboat that's only really meant to take 6.
Mm.
And so that's what happened to Benjamin Spooner Briggs, his family, and his crew. But look at this, when I can find a probable answer, it still doesn't destroy the other possible answers, but it seems rational and probable.
Probable. A lot of the stories you had on Fortean TV, I look at some of them, and I think they're not really that Fortean. I reckon I could reckon a few there, but there were some really strange stories there. Did you have any particular favourites that still have you scratching your head?
Well, I've got a list on here myself. The one that has me scratching my head more than any is, although it's a very simple thing, was Oscar the dog, who seemed able to hypnotize people.
Yeah,
They would
right.
come under his control when they picked him up and hugged him and responded to his enthusiasm. And I think it may be because that reminded me of Prince when I was a little boy.
Maybe, yeah.
There was
So,
Oscar the hypnotic dog, and
yep.
the other one that I particularly liked was the story about the mermaid and the fisherman. There was
That was I'm thinking the Mermaid Song, but I'm trying to actually think which story it was.
in one of our programs. These guys were out fishing off the coast, and they weren't out far to sea. They were just a few hundred yards out, and looking after the nets and the tackle. And one of them calls to his shipmates, "Look at that! That's not a fish." And it was, so they declared, a mermaid. And they took her on board, and she looked so intensely sad and pleading when she was out of the water that, rough and ready as they were, they looked at each other and said, "Let's put the poor kid back." And they threw her back. And what had they really picked up? Of course, there were some very strange-looking seals and seal-like water beasts that you could, by a stretch of the imagination, wonder if they were a merman or a mermaid. So that's one that I found intriguing. And the other bits I liked, and that was one that had a pretty probable, rational solution. There was the archaeologists. This was in the States, not far from Hollywood, which led
Oh yes, I remember that one. Yes.
which led to the answer. These guys were digging, and they were pulling up bits of what they thought were Egyptian relics. And this whole theory went round that the Egyptians, who were great seafarers, had actually got to the States and had built a temple and built pyramids, and all their Egyptian equipment was buried under the desert not far from Hollywood. And of course, what I think it was, when DeMille made the 10 Commandments in 1922, which is where you have the Israelites leaving Egypt. And when he had financial problems, instead of having everything cleared properly from the set, DeMille ordered a gang of labourers just to take the thing down rather than getting professionals in to store it, look after it, and just get out of here, bury it in the desert. And so when this other expedition started digging in the desert and came up with all sorts of fascinating Egyptian material, it was just something that had found a refuge from the 1922 version of the 10 Commandments.
That's right. Yes. So I do remember that was quite a funny one. So, I mean, that's the thing with Forteanness, isn't it? You've got this very strange, everything from ghosts to just weird, coincidental, silly stuff.
Yeah.
And that's what's fun about it. And that's what's made fun about Fortean TV. And that's why I think you were excellent in it. You were there with your leather jacket bouncing around, and you were a martial artist. So there was a reason why you were doing things that were a bit, I certainly couldn't do at my age. So
I put it this way, I did my best. I think with all my martial arts work, and I was very greatly honoured when the guys who run the World Judo Association just a few years ago, I was over 80 at the time, said that they had been studying my fighting career and the work that I'd done, and I didn't have to do anything for it. They had awarded me, on the view of my career, black belt fifth dan. And I
Mm,
thought, well, I never had to fight for this, much as I'd have loved to.
mm.
But I framed it. I've got it pinned up on the wall.
Yeah, it's wonderful stuff. So anyway, we need to finish up here. You're
Yes.
obviously speaking to a lot of people at the moment about the new Fortean DVD.
Yeah.
I've got a picture of it up here on up here, so it's available to be. We'll put some links in there. Really, people should buy it. I think it's a really, really excellent series. There's lots of series slightly like it, in search of maybe some of these, Arthur C. Clarke's, but I think this is a lot of fun. What have you been doing lately, Lionel, that's spooky
Well,
to keep yourself on your toes?
right. Well, the trying to think of some of the more recent things that we've looked at or been asked to look at, and I get occasionally really sad, disturbing letters from people who have found themselves under what they believe to be an attack from negative psychic forces, and I'll go around and bless them and perform the prayers of exorcism. Again, anoint them with holy water. And I get a number of those cases come because I think once somebody has had a trouble like that and been made unwell by it, they will tell their other friends when they've recovered, and then I will get requests for another exorcism. Those have been the recent things, and work-wise, I've started on I'm started on 2/3 of the way through a book which is to be called The Quest for Meaning. And into that, I've put all my theology and my philosophy, and I've looked at the meaning of personality. What is the thing inside you and inside me which says, I am, and is aware of the selfhood? And then to look at the environment, the family and friends and loved ones that go with that identifying self and psyche. And I've gone on to put this, I've called the book The Quest for Meaning, what we're trying to find in life and what we can learn from the environment around us and the people that we know. Because I'm working with Walters and Jones Publishing at the moment and done a lot of stuff for them. My latest ebooks are available on Amazon, and there's I've got a YouTube channel which is called Who is Lionel Fanthorpe?
Yeah. Well, make sure we put all these links at the bottom of the thing so people can find you and look. You've obviously got lots of stuff going on. The search is never ending.
Right. And may I just say before we finish, I have very greatly enjoyed being on the program with you, and thank you for the invitation.
It's been a real honour. I thank you very much, Lionel, and hopefully we'll talk to you again sometime, because I'm sure we could fill out 1,000 programs to talk about some of your things. Anyway, take care and we'll talk later. Bye-bye.
Bye for now. God bless you.